Breaking the fourth wall in a film or television show is often just a quick interaction with the audience, a joke to acknowledge its own limited existence. But take a moment to imagine how that would feel for the character that does it, having to know exactly how their reality works in order to do so. Now, imagine such in a video game with even more walls of reality you're able to break, not only being controlled by the creators, but also by the audience you're attempting to communicate with. And one more time, imagine not only knowing that someone else is physically controlling you, but now being controlled around a museum of your own face. A little weird, maybe? Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I will be your tour guide, Bart Riley. Before we begin, I'd like to check that everyone has paid their admission fee. Now, I am a non-profit tour guide, so you can put your wallets away. What I actually need you to do is play through Ratchet Clank 2 Locked and Loaded. That's Going Commando for American tourists. First released for PlayStation 2 in 2003. Now there are three methods here. You can complete the game with all weapon upgrades and unlock the shortcuts menu, or when you reach the Boldan level of Silver City, you can either find the dedicated teleporter and time window, or purposefully knock yourself off the rail lines to get out of bounds, glitch into this building, then unglitch your camera. From here, kill several waves of goons to reach this other teleporter. Everyone ready? Excellent. Let's begin. Welcome to the Insomniac Museum. This location is modelled on the real-world offices in Burbank, California, of Insomniac Games, developers of Spyro the Dragon, Ratchet Clank, Resistance, and the latest Spider-Man titles. It was founded by Mike Stout, one of the original developers who collected and arranged these pieces in addition to his other responsibilities, because this was an era when designers were allowed the spare time for such extra activities. This collection covers not only Locked and Loaded, but also the first Ratchet Clank game from the previous year. The first thing you find as you wander around will be a large number of models, most without textures, of various characters and objects that were removed from the released games. Each exhibit is provided with an audio log from the various Insomniac team members, filling the dead gallery silence with a sense of humanity behind these creations.
Greetings, this is Oliver Wade, the animation director at Insomniac Games, doing an atrocious British accent. Ratchet battled this beast whilst riding a boat through blowfish-infested waters.
We once again suspect it was due to the squirrels with hacksaws.
If you find a vehicle that you're allowed to pilot, keep your hands and feet inside at all times. And please don't hesitate to attack our living mannequin. I assure you it does not feel pain, or hatred, or anything at all. In a room to your right, we find the gravity spheres that were in fact too small to be included with the quick camera spin that they create. Then, climbing around the outside of the building allows access to a gravity ramp course that was made to test the original Magna boots, which were a fraction of the speed of their updated counterparts. So thank gods we're here in the sequel. In fact, the entire interior is climbable from the ramps placed all over for your convenience. Not that there's anything additional on these walls to play with.
Here at Insomniac, we're so hopped up on caffeine that we bounce off the walls!
Going a layer deeper, we are granted with a series of menus that lets us manipulate reality itself, changing various explosion and laser effects, or creating our own version of the Infiltrator minigame. For the common gamer, and even I as a practitioner of game design, I acknowledge that all the numbers may mean nothing to most people, but at least the colours are pretty. But, of course, the spectacle of our exhibit is the Tower of Measurements, an arena to trial Ratchet's movement and jumping capabilities for the most enjoyable gameplay for all players. An insider's tip, it is very possible to get to that window near the top, but there's no evidence or I may be fired. One quite amazing thing is that this level was only one unlockable in the game, alongside a plethora of other conceptual art galleries, promotional materials, and crazy reality-breaking tales. And starting in 2011, Mike Stout, alongside Tony Garcia, would continue sharing experiences as designers with Useless Podcast, literally taking you through every step of the game. So, with such dedication to the past of their series, how did the Insomniac crew handle things for the future? That's not actually what I meant, but we'll get to that soon. Please be patient. In the follow-up title, Up Your Arsenal, I'm happy to announce that the price of entry has been adjusted substantially. All you have to do here is follow a slight detour in Metropolis, not far from your ship, and find this warp pad. Then restart your console, change the clock to 3 AM and try again. Same as the first Bold End warp. For a games company called Insomniac, it's only fitting that its biggest fans would have the namesake condition by choice. While this museum only covers a single game and doesn't include most of the foundational tools as before, the production cycle for Arsenal was quite hectic and restrictive on time, as discussed in Stout and Garcia's podcast. So it balances out with more elements getting cut. Similar to the measurement arena from the first museum, there are several more outdoor sets that require warp pads to reach, and a room dedicated to the vidcomic levels that is initially closed off behind a ridiculously difficult series of hacker puzzles for some unfathomable reason. But in terms of presentation, I do have the complaint that while the descriptions no longer have voiceovers, which I could forgive, the text is also much smaller and harder to read, which I cannot forgive. And no, there isn't an option to change font size, I double checked. To fit with the theme of spies and espionage, a second playthrough will have you finding hidden symbols throughout the game, accompanied by odd little secrets. I'll make the assumption that these were written by the individual developers, with people like Leviticus and David Vesip appearing both here and in the game's credits. Collecting all of these will give coordinates to the special level. However, seeing as this spin-off title was developed by High Impact Games, any museum included here would not technically count as an Insomniac museum. And so they didn't include a museum at all, but instead made it into a treehouse, maybe for the purpose of seeming young and groovy.
It's so hot, it's cool.
I think I got the wrong guy.
Audio logs return, but without subtitles, and amongst the removed content is a lot of concept art for the game that was completed. But I can excuse this as there were no unlockables in the main secrets menu for this category. Scattered around are gift boxes as part of a hide and seek minigame you can play ad infinitum.
That is not kitten.
And there is what looks like a machine or extra door outside, but I personally couldn't find a reason for it. But the highlight of this museum treehouse is viewing the entire Captain Quark opera with additional verses, which may surprise a lot of Ratchet & Clank fans to learn that there is a Captain Quark opera. The developer renditions were probably not needed though. High Impact also included a treehouse in their other series contribution, Size Matters. But I never owned this one, and even my dedication has its limits, which I had already wasted acquiring footage for later on in this video. As the second main entry in the future quadrilogy, you may think that the museum here would cover Tools of Destruction and Quest for Booty as well, but not so. Instead, while the layout is still the Insomniac offices, albeit updated, this one has more relation to the game's main narrative than previous versions, by filtering it all through the imagination of Clank and his psychic connection to the Zoni creatures, which to unlock the museum required collecting 40 of. On the downside, much like an actual stream of consciousness, this area has less defined borders and doorways, and the information hotspots tend to blend in with the ground, which has made some visitors uncertain of when they had eventually explored the entire level. Voiceless text boxes are longer than in 3, scenic artwork like in the treehouse, but there is a documentary video on the Agorian enemy species, a versus match demonstration that you can view from different angles, and a couple new areas to fly around, including hoverboard race courses and obstacle moons. Also, say what you want about interpretive art, but this one moment says so much to me, and it's not saying anything good. This building in Meridian City may not be an Insomniac museum, but is still noteworthy as a complete diegetic museum instead. The plot of Into That requires our heroes to acquire a previous doomsday weapon, the Dimensionator, thankfully not asking us to smash our entire way through the museum to get to it, so that we can actually enjoy this location. We even get quite a few voiced explanations by carrying a tour bot at the end of our wrench.
These peaceful herbivores are harmless, except for when the occasional explorer or picnic enthusiast ends up stuck to the bottom of their massive feet. This exhibit celebrates two of the galaxy's greatest warbots, Kronk and Zephyr. They currently work for the Polaris Defense Force.
Warning. Historical discrepancy detected. Updating records for Docent 427.
Oh dear, my mistake. They are dead. Well, this is awkward.
Not that I approve of AI taking my job. Almost like a victory lap before the reboot happened, every single exhibit we see here is from within the franchise itself.
Here stands the heroic figure of Dan Johnson.
Except that one. Now, mentioning the reboot. Admission is available from the very start of the challenge mode, so you may think that they are being a bit more generous here, but that's a trap. The layout consists of a lobby and 6 wings that are better described as storage sheds. The first shed is free to enter, but they chose to withhold the other rooms behind these gold bolt paywalls, even though there are a few other rewards that the bolts unlock, and they ain't bloody worth it. None of this is properly presented to you or even organised with any logic, not that I could tell. Some vehicles are collected together, some weapons are collected together, but it really does feel like each game's assets were thrown in here and left to rot. We just happen to stumble across it. Hangar 002 is the only unique area for being a movie gallery full of clips they included from the movie, reminding us that this was as much a tie-in as it was a remake. The problem is that the classic adventure that was remade had capitalist satire embedded in it, and I always knew that this would be a capitalist product trying to hide that satire from the world. Only now do I see, all these years later, exactly where they were hiding it. It would seem that the original Insomniac Museum set such a high standard that every following attempt from the same franchise would fall short in one way or another. but how does it compare to other digital museum tours elsewhere? Very good. It compares very, very good. End of comparison. Okay, look, people who spend a lot of time playing video games are actually a relatively small demographic. And a lot smaller than that is the demographic of people who care about how video games are made. So as a part of that minority, and no, I do not say that very often, I do appreciate a game that includes stuff like developer commentaries and so on. Just like enjoying a DVD bonus menu, back when I had all the time in the world for that. Because we all seem to be running out of time. But in reverse of DVDs that occasionally had little games to play with your TV remote, video game special features are often limited to video. And I know a rebuttal could be, well, they are making an entire game, isn't that enough for you? And keep in mind, I do care about this stuff. It's not about making more game, but recycling pieces of what has already been made. This is where we get into the many questions of game preservation and what deserves to be documented. Some games were probably not interesting enough to keep a record of developments. Others were hellish enough that certain people involved might not like things getting recorded. But to recommend some general areas of my interest, I would say earlier versions of the story or locations, demo builds which were significantly changed, and individual mechanics that were tested but never fit in with the rest, along with the conceptual art and promotions that gets well represented already. In fact, yeah, I'd say the talking head documentaries are that extra work with filming and editing, or for the marketing team if it's being made as a commercial, but if it has to be made, you can still throw them in here. Now, as my long-term followers will know, and my hateful debaters will discover, I have previously thrown my weight fully behind physical games media making a comeback, and you're probably ready to call hypocrisy as I now fight for digital. But I am saying that both mediums have their strengths, and I am in favour of each sticking to their own, and even being used together instead of one always trying to replace the other. Please indulge me as I make a point by stealing clips from another Australian tuber.
Then there's the making of DVD. Now, I spoke out against these in my Age of Conan reboxing, so I actually watched this one, and sadly my fears were confirmed. It is a lot of talking developer heads over footage of the game in various states of completion, and artwork that would be frankly better showcased in an art book, but we'll get to that in a minute. What this amounts to is a lot of promotional footage that is included, seemingly just to pad out this set. I still don't like these. Here is the bonus DVD and soundtrack in this one case. The bonus DVD is, I suspect, the same old shower. I didn't watch it, and I have no desire to watch it, or any other bonus DVDs, collector's edition makers. This didn't need padding. This is full of stuff. Notice what's not here? No making of DVD. Good work, CD Projekt Red, you're learning.
Yeah, a whole other disc for a very long video that no one will watch, wasting both effort and materials right there. Instead, let us play as Geralt standing in line at the snack bar to order an extra large popcorn and a soda. Practically no extra effort required, just one new area in which to display it all. And if they're already taking up the physical space with disc and compartment, they should utilise the digital space too. Another problem that the Bard brings up a lot.
Look what gets giant, lovely representation in the book. Horrible, out-of-date in-game models that were probably out of date by the time the game came out. These were probably replaced. Absolutely terrible. And this indicates that the balance of power over when they were designing this book lent towards the digital artists rather than the concept art or others like that. And they wanted their art represented in the art book, I think, and they were able to pull the strings necessary to get these horrible things put in so they can show it off like it's a folio. It really highlights only what is lost in translation from canvas to computer screen. I'm not sure why they include this at all. Oh, sure, this model stuff and texture work is art, and you know, by definition can belong in an art book, and that's fine. But it's strange. It just highlights the gulf between what is imagined and what becomes the reality of the project, which in this case, nothing's really gained in transition. It's just things that's lost.
So you've got 3D computer assets to show off. Might be good to get your own 3D space to do that in. Two independent issues, but potentially the same solution, and I hope at least one happy dwarf. I'm sorry, I know I'm supposed to be the know-it-all tour guide here, but I do not even understand this. You and I, we're looking through all this evidence of creativity in game design, and yet for practicality the answer has existed for 2 decades and no one else has run with it. The closest to an interactive behind-the-scenes tour I have ever found outside of R&C was in 2019's Anodyne 2, which took it one step further in a narrative about an organisation that literally built the world, giving the player character mid-story access to unfinished worlds. It's so meta that it feeds back into itself and becomes not meta. Should have made a video about that game, damn it. This one was created by a development team of 2, and remembering that the museum trend was started by one developer just for fun, 3 people are out here kicking the ass of an entire industry. For absolute shame. Because you see, there is another layer to my chagrin that hits even closer to my personal interests, and involves a completely different genre, or shall we say presentation style. I have nothing against one game locking this kind of stuff away as rewards. The encore at the end of a complete experience by getting to experience more behind the curtain. But when a collection of games that is intentionally made to celebrate a developer or console then withholds the actual details of their history until you've earned the right to such knowledge, that I think is ludicrous. We live in a very nostalgic time for pop culture. Bloody hell do we. But even closer to the original museum's release, there were such compilation titles and they had the same problem. Because whatever the hell these school systems are trying to tell us, history is not about dates and locations. It's about what the world was like surrounding these specific events. And we could be getting a feel of that if we were allowed to explore for ourselves. What came before these games? What impact did they have on release? What legacy did they leave behind? All very good questions that a digital museum could answer for us. I ask you to use your imaginations one final time and picture your favourite game as a number of circles within one another. The game itself, the innermost circle. Everything you get to experience front and centre. Surrounding that is the museum of concept art, developer commentaries and cut content. And surrounding that is a greater world involving audience reception, competitive response within the market, and impact on broader culture that helps us appreciate the inner circles even more. Why should we accept being limited to only one circle when there is so much more to experience for our time and money? For a business culture that's obsessed with remaking and releasing the same few games repeatedly, going on 3 console generations now, is that too much to ask for? This concludes our tour for today. Thank you all for visiting. Please like and share this experience before you leave, and feel free to visit the gift shop on your way.